They took all her clothes and left her for dead. "I'll take you home," said the Mafia boss. But this wasn't a rescue. It was a claim. A brutal crime lord, feared by everyone, decided she was his because the men who tried to kill her belonged to his enemy. Now she's trapped inside his mansion, locked away like a prisoner, protected and possessed at the same time. Every glance, every touch makes her question if she's living with her savior or her captor. And just when she begins to see the man behind the monster, a darker truth explodes. Her own family is caught in the crossfire. One wrong move could destroy them both. So the question is, when the devil himself says, "I'll take you home," is he saving her life or stealing it forever? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The autumn night wrapped around Elena like a damp blanket as she hurried down the empty street. Her fingers clutched her purse, knuckles white against the worn leather. The cafe's late shift had dragged on longer than usual, leaving her exhausted and desperate to get home to her tiny apartment. Streetlights cast weak circles of yellow light on the wet pavement. Eleanor's sensible work shoes clicked against the concrete, the sound echoing off brick walls. A chill ran down her spine as she approached the alley, her usual shortcut that would save her 15 precious minutes of walking. She hesitated at the entrance, peering into the shadows. Something felt wrong tonight. The hair on the back of her neck stood up, but she shook off the feeling. She was being silly. She'd taken this route dozens of times before. 3 steps into the alley, she heard it. Footsteps behind her, out of sync with her own. Elena's heart jumped into her throat. She walked faster, her breath coming in short bursts. The footsteps multiplied. More than one person now. "Hey, pretty lady," a rough voice called out. "Where you running to?" Elena broke into a sprint, but she didn't make it far. Strong hands grabbed her from behind, spinning her around. 3 men surrounded her, their faces twisted with cruel amusement. The tallest one, with a jagged scar across his jaw, yanked her purse away. "Please," Elena whispered, "take it. Take everything. Just let me go." "Oh, we will take everything," the scarred man sneered. "But first, we need to teach you a lesson about keeping your mouth shut when you see things you shouldn't." Elena's mind raced back to earlier that week, the strange meeting she'd witnessed in the cafe's back room. The men in expensive suits, the briefcase full of cash, the whispered threats. She'd pretended not to notice, but they'd seen her watching. The first punch knocked the wind from her lungs. She crumpled against the brick wall, gasping. They didn't stop there. Fists and boots found her ribs, her back, her face. Through the pain, she felt rough hands tearing at her clothes. Her shirt ripped. Her skirt was yanked away. They left her in nothing but her undergarments, shivering in the cold rain that had started to fall. "Please," she begged between sobs. "I won't tell anyone. I swear." "We know you won't," one of them laughed, pocketing her phone. Another grabbed her wallet, counting out the measly tips she'd earned that night. "This is just to make sure you remember what happens to nosy little bitches." The beating continued until Elena couldn't tell rain from blood on her skin. Every breath was agony. Her vision blurred, consciousness slipping away and returning in waves of pain. She heard car doors slam, an engine roar to life. They were leaving her here, broken and half naked in the filthy alley. Time lost meaning as Elena drifted in and out of awareness. The rain soaked through to her bones. Her body shook with violent tremors. From cold or shock, she couldn't tell anymore. She tried to move, to crawl, toward the street, but her muscles wouldn't respond. Through swollen eyes, she saw headlights cutting through the darkness. The bright beams swept across her battered form as a vehicle stopped at the alley's entrance. A car door opened and closed. Footsteps approached, heavy, measured, deliberate. Elena wanted to scream, to beg this new threat to leave her alone, but only a whimper escaped her split lips. A tall figure crouched beside her. Even through her blurred vision, she could make out an expensive suit, broad shoulders, and eyes that gleamed like black ice in the darkness. His voice, when it came, was low and commanding, a voice used to being obeyed. "Don't move," he said, and despite the pain screaming through every nerve, Elena found herself freezing in place. "You're mine now." Those 3 words should have terrified her more than anything else that had happened that night. Instead, they settled over her like a dark promise. Maybe it was the blood loss or the shock. But in that moment, as consciousness finally slipped away completely, Elena felt an impossible sense of security in those threatening words. The last thing she registered was the feeling of being lifted, strong arms cradling her broken body with surprising gentleness. Then darkness claimed her, and Elena Rossi fell into the black void, unaware that this night of violence had set her on a path from which there would be no return. The rain continued to fall, washing away the blood from the alley's pavement. But nothing could wash away the mark this night would leave on Elena's life. The night she became the property of a man whose very name struck fear into the hearts of those who had hurt her. A man who would rewrite her destiny with hands stained in blood and a heart locked in ice. Dante Moretti stared down at the broken woman lying in the filthy alley. Rain plastered her dark hair against her bruised face, and her skin was already mottling with ugly purple marks. His jaw clenched as he noted the state of her undress, the torn remnants of clothing scattered around her. "Boss?" One of his men stepped forward, gun ready. "Should we take her to the hospital?" "No." Dante's voice cut through the rain like steel. "Clear the car, now." His men scrambled to obey, knowing better than to question his orders. Dante shrugged off his expensive suit jacket and draped it over Elena's nearly naked form. With practiced ease, he slid one arm under her knees and the other behind her shoulders, lifting her as gently as if she were made of glass. She whimpered in her unconscious state, head lolling against his chest. The sound stirred something dangerous in him, a protective rage he hadn't felt since his sister's death. Blood from Elena's cuts seeped into his white shirt, but Dante didn't care. His focus was solely on the woman in his arms, so light and fragile against his strength. "Eyes forward," he barked at his men as he approached the car. They snapped to attention, gazes deliberately avoiding the sight of their boss carrying a half-naked woman. His driver held the door open, and Dante carefully maneuvered Elena into the back seat, sliding in beside her. The drive to his mansion was silent except for Elena's shallow breathing. Dante kept one hand on her pulse, monitoring its weak but steady rhythm. His other hand typed rapid orders on his phone, mobilizing his network to hunt down the men responsible. The Cavalli family would pay dearly for this transgression. At the mansion, his housekeeper gasped at the sight of Elena but quickly composed herself. "The blue guest room is ready, sir. I'll fetch the first aid supplies." Dante carried Elena up the sweeping staircase, past priceless artwork and ancient tapestries. The blue guest room was one of the most luxurious in his home, with silk wallpaper and antique furnishings. He laid Elena on the king-sized bed, careful not to jostle her injuries. "Send for Dr. Martinez," he ordered the housekeeper, "and bring clean clothes, something soft." While waiting for the doctor, Dante stood at the window, watching rain streak down the bulletproof glass. His phone buzzed constantly with updates from his men, but he ignored them. His attention remained fixed on Elena's reflection in the window, monitoring every shallow breath. The doctor arrived within 20 minutes, her medical bag in hand. "Everyone out," she commanded, one of the few people who dared give orders in Dante's presence. He allowed it, knowing Elena needed privacy during examination. In his study, Dante paced like a caged animal. His knuckles whitened around his phone as reports came in identifying Elena's attackers. 3 low-level thugs working for Vincent Cavalli, his most ambitious rival. The pieces clicked into place. The cafe where Elena worked was a known meeting spot for business transactions. She must have seen something she shouldn't have. "Idiots," he muttered. If they'd been his men, they would have known better than to leave a witness alive. Now Elena was his problem, and his opportunity. An hour later, Dr. Martinez found him in his study. "She'll recover. Multiple contusions, 2 cracked ribs, mild concussion. No signs of sexual assault, thankfully. I've cleaned and bandaged everything, given her something for the pain. She'll sleep for several hours." Dante nodded, dismissing the doctor with a wave. He returned to the blue room, finding Elena cleaned and bandaged, dressed in soft pajamas his housekeeper had provided. Fresh clothes were folded neatly on a nearby chair, simple but expensive items in her size, which his staff had procured with typical efficiency. He settled into an armchair near the bed, watching her sleep. In repose, with the blood cleaned away, he could see the delicate beauty of her features. Such a small thing to cause so much trouble, but trouble could be useful, in the right hands. Eleanor stirred several hours later, consciousness returning slowly. Dante observed as awareness crept into her expression, followed quickly by panic as she registered the unfamiliar surroundings. She sat up too quickly and gasped in pain, one hand flying to her bandaged ribs. "Where am I?" Her voice was hoarse, eyes darting around the opulent room before landing on him. "Who are you?" "You're safe," Dante replied, keeping his voice neutral. "There are clothes for you on the chair. The bathroom is through that door if you'd like to clean up." Eleanor clutched the blankets tighter, wariness evident in every line of her body. "I heard voices earlier. You were giving orders about finding someone. The men who—" She swallowed hard, unable to finish the sentence. "Yes." Dante saw no reason to lie. "My men are hunting them now." "Your men?" Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed by fresh fear. "You're like them. You're Mafia." A cold smile curved Dante's lips. "No, Kara, I'm nothing like them. They are dogs who attacked an innocent woman. I am the one who will make them pay." Evening had fallen by the time Elena emerged from the bathroom, dressed in the clothes provided. Soft black pants and a loose sweater that wouldn't aggravate her injuries. Dante had arranged for dinner to be served in the formal dining room, an intimidating space with crystal chandeliers and a table that could seat 20. He sat at the head of the table, Elena placed to his right. She stared at the elaborate place setting, hands trembling slightly as she picked up her water glass. "I need to go home," she said finally, voice stronger than before. "My brother will be worried. I can't stay here." "You're not going anywhere," Dante replied, cutting into his steak with precise movements. "The men who did this, they belong to my enemy. That makes you mine now." Sunlight streamed through heavy curtains as Elena stirred awake, her body aching with each small movement. The door opened quietly, and a uniformed maid entered carrying a silver breakfast tray. The aroma of fresh coffee and pastries filled the room. "Good morning, miss," the maid said softly, setting the tray on a nearby table. "Mr. Moretti instructed us to bring you breakfast." Elena pushed herself up against the pillows, wincing at her tender ribs. "Please, I need to make a phone call. My brother must be worried sick. Or the police, I need to report what happened." The maid's face tightened with sympathy and fear. "I'm sorry, miss. No phones allowed." "Mr. Moretti's orders." She hurried from the room before Elena could protest further. Tears of frustration burned Elena's eyes as she stared at the elaborate breakfast spread: fresh croissants, eggs Benedict, fresh squeezed orange juice, and coffee in fine china. Even the butter had been shaped into delicate rosettes. A gilded prison was still a prison. A knock at the door announced Dante's arrival. He filled the doorway in an expertly tailored black suit, his presence commanding the space. "I trust you slept well." Like anyone sleeps well after being beaten and kidnapped. Elena shot back, lifting her chin despite her fear. Something dangerous flickered in his dark eyes. "Rescued, not kidnapped. Would you prefer I'd left you bleeding in that alley?" "I'd prefer to go home." "Not possible." He gestured to the breakfast tray. "Eat. Then I'll show you around your new home." Elena wanted to refuse out of spite, but her stomach growled traitorously. She ate in tense silence while Dante watched from an armchair, checking messages on his phone. The food was excellent, but it tasted like ash in her mouth. After breakfast, Dante led her on a tour of the mansion. Elena's bare feet sank into plush carpets as they moved through room after room of old-world luxury. A library with leather-bound books, a conservatory filled with orchids, a formal dining room that could seat 50 people. Everything spoke of old money and power, but the gilding couldn't hide the cage. Armed guards patrolled the grounds, visible through every window. Security cameras tracked their movement through the halls. Every exterior door had multiple locks, and the gates at the end of the long driveway were solid steel. The grounds are extensively monitored, Dante explained, his tone casual but weighted with warning. For your protection, of course. Of course, Elena echoed bitterly. Because I'm yours now, right? Like a pet? He turned to her, eyes blazing. Like someone under my protection. Someone who will be killed if my enemies find her. Remember that before you do anything foolish. That night, the nightmares came. Elena thrashed in silk sheets, reliving the attack, rough hands, cruel laughter, the crack of fists against flesh. She woke, gasping, drenched in cold sweat. To her surprise, Dante sat in the armchair near her bed, his jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled up. He didn't speak, but his presence was oddly steadying as her breathing slowly calmed. "Why are you here?" she finally asked. "You were screaming." His voice was quieter than usual, almost gentle. "The doctor left something for the pain if you need it." Elena shook her head, studying him in the dim light. For a moment, she glimpsed something human beneath his controlled exterior concern, perhaps even guilt. But then his mask slipped back into place, and he stood to leave. "Try to rest," he ordered, but his tone lacked its usual edge. She waited an hour after he left, listening to the quiet house. The guard outside her door changed shifts at midnight. She'd noted the routine. When heavy footsteps retreated down the hall, Elena slipped from her bed. The new guard was younger, less careful. His phone sat on a small table while he patrolled the corridor. Elena's heart thundered as she eased the door open, snatched the phone, and fled down the servants' stairs she'd noticed during the tour. Cold marble bit into her bare feet as she ran through the darkened house. Every shadow seemed to hide a guard, but somehow she made it to a side door. The lock clicked open under trembling fingers. Fresh air filled her lungs as Elena sprinted across manicured lawns, staying in the shadows of sculpted hedges. The phone clutched in her hand was her lifeline. If she could just get past the gates, she could call for help. The driveway stretched endlessly ahead, moonlight painting the gravel silver. Her feet bled, but freedom beckoned. Just a little further. Headlights suddenly blazed to life, blinding her. A black car purred to life, rolling forward to block her path. Elena stumbled backward as Dante emerged from the driver's side, his expression terrible in the harsh light. He stalked toward her with fluid grace, like a predator cornering prey. Elena's legs gave out, and she collapsed to her knees on the rough gravel. The stolen phone clattered uselessly beside her. Dante crouched before her, one hand gripping her chin to force her gaze to his. His whispered words carried more menace than any shout. "There's no escape, Elena." His other hand brushed her cheek, the gesture almost tender despite his words. "You'll only hurt yourself trying. Now, let's get those feet cleaned up." He lifted her easily, cradling her against his chest as he carried her back toward the house. Elena closed her eyes in defeat. Knowing the truth of his words, she was truly trapped in the devil's domain. The iron grip on Elena's arm burned as Dante dragged her back through the mansion's heavy oak doors. Her bare feet, scraped raw from running down the gravel driveway, left tiny bloodstains on the marble floor. But instead of the punishment she expected, Dante's face held something darker than anger, fear. "You want to know why you can't leave?" His voice was deadly quiet as he pulled her down a corridor she hadn't seen before. "Let me show you exactly what's waiting out there." They descended a dimly lit staircase, the temperature dropping with each step. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs as they reached a steel door. The scent of copper and chemicals hit her nose before Dante even pushed it open. "Look," he commanded, forcing her forward into what appeared to be some kind of medical room. On a steel table lay a body, covered to the chest with a white sheet. Elena recognized the face, one of her attackers from the alley. His eyes were open, unseeing, and his throat had been cut with surgical precision. "He was left on my doorstep this morning," Dante said, his breath hot against her ear. "A message from the men who hurt you. They know you're alive. They know you're here." Elena's knees buckled. Dante's arms snaked around her waist, holding her upright against his chest. The dead man's face blurred as tears filled her eyes. "This is what happens in my world," Dante continued, his voice low and fierce. "But I promise you, Elena, what they did to him will look merciful compared to what I'll do to anyone who tries to touch you again." His words should have terrified her. Instead, they sent an inappropriate shiver down her spine. She watched his reflection in the steel cabinet's jaw clenched, eyes blazing with protective fury. This was the devil everyone whispered about, the man who could order death with a nod. "I don't want your protection," she whispered, but her voice trembled. Dante spun her to face him, backing her against the wall. His hands planted on either side of her head, caging her in. "You don't have a choice anymore. The moment they put their hands on you, you became mine to protect, mine to keep safe, mine to avenge." The possessive growl in his voice made her pulse skip. He was too close, his cologne mixing with the morgue's sterile scent. Elena forced herself to meet his gaze, refusing to show weakness. "You'll gut anyone who touches me. Like you gutted him? Worse." His finger traced her jaw, feather-light despite his brutal words. "I'll peel the skin from their bones while they breathe. I'll make them beg for the mercy of death." The terrifying part wasn't his threat, it was how safe those words made her feel. How the monster everyone feared was promising to unleash hell itself to keep her protected. Dante led her back upstairs, his hand never leaving the small of her back. Every window they passed showed armed men patrolling the grounds, their black suits stark against the manicured lawns. The mansion that had felt like a prison now seemed like a fortress. "Your room has been secured," Dante said as they climbed the main staircase. "Additional cameras, reinforced windows, guards outside your door, 24/7. "So I'm trapped here forever?" Elena asked, hating how small her voice sounded. Dante paused on the landing, turning to face her. Something softened in his expression. "You're protected here forever. There's a difference." Later that evening, Elena stood on her balcony, watching the sun sink behind the estate's high walls. Below, Dante's voice carried up as he positioned guards, his tone leaving no room for argument. "No one enters without my explicit permission. No one. She doesn't leave this room without an escort." The cool breeze carried the scent of roses from the garden, but Elena barely noticed. Her mind was stuck on the dead man in the basement, on Dante's promises of violence, on the way her old life had shattered like glass. Just days ago she'd been a simple barista, dreaming of art school and a quiet future. Now she stood in designer clothes, watching armed men patrol beneath her window, belonging to a man who dealt in death. The Elena who walked home through that alley was gone as dead as her attacker on the steel table. In her place stood someone new, someone caught between terror and fascination, between running and staying. A guard positioned himself outside her door, his weapon visible under his jacket. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, shivering despite the mild evening. There was no going back now. She'd been pulled into Dante's dark world, where protection came with possession, where safety meant surrender. In the gathering darkness, she watched Dante stride across the courtyard, power emanating from every movement. He looked up, catching her gaze, and even from this distance, she felt the weight of his stare. His message was clear. She was his now, for better or worse, and nothing would change that. Morning sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting golden patterns across the massive dining room table. Elena sat rigidly in her chair, watching as Dante spread butter on his toast with precise measured movements. Everything about him screamed control, from his perfectly pressed shirt to the way he commanded the space around him without saying a word. "The coffee's getting cold," he said, not looking up from the financial paper spread beside his plate. Elena lifted her chin. "Maybe I don't want any of your coffee." His dark eyes finally met hers, and the ghost of a smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Funny. The girl at the cafe told me you practically lived on the stuff." Her stomach clenched. He'd been asking about her. Stalking me now? Learning about what's mine. He set down his paper, giving her his full attention. "Tell me about the cafe." "It's just a job." "No." His voice softened unexpectedly. "It's more than that. Your eyes light up when you talk about it. Why?" The genuine interest in his tone caught her off guard. Elena found herself answering despite her determination to stay silent. "I liked the regulars. The old man who came in every morning for his espresso, the college students who'd camp out for hours with their laptops. It felt normal, safe." "And your art?" When her eyes widened in surprise, he added, "I saw your sketchbook in your bag. You went through my things? I need to know everything about you." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Show me your work sometime." Elena reached for the coffee pot, determined to ignore how his interest made her pulse quicken. "My brother's the only one who sees my art." "Ah, yes, Luca." Dante's expression darkened. "The one who keeps getting into trouble with loan sharks." The coffee pot slipped in her grip, scalding liquid splashing across her hand. Elena gasped, more in surprise than pain. Before she could react, Dante was beside her, his chair scraping against the floor. His large hands engulfed hers, surprisingly gentle as he examined the reddening skin. "Come here," he ordered, leading her to the kitchen sink. Cool water rushed over her burn, his body caging her against the counter. "I can handle it myself," she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Stubborn woman. His breath brushed her ear as he reached around her for a clean towel. Always fighting, even when someone's trying to help. The proximity of his body, the heat radiating from his chest against her back, made it hard to think. Maybe I don't want help from someone who's keeping me prisoner. He spun her around, trapping her between his arms. "Is that what you think this is? Prison? What else would you call it?" She glared up at him, refusing to be intimidated by his closeness. "You won't let me leave, won't let me contact anyone. I'm keeping you alive." His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Those men who hurt you, they were sent by Vittorio Castellano. He knows you witnessed his drug deal at the cafe. He won't stop until you're dead." "I didn't see anything. Doesn't matter." "You were there." His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheek. "And now you're under my protection." The tenderness of his touch contrasted sharply with the violence in his words. Elena's breath caught as his gaze dropped to her lips. The air between them crackled with tension. "I don't need your protection," she whispered, but she didn't pull away. "No?" He leaned closer, his lips barely brushing hers. "Then why are you trembling?" The kiss, when it came, was both fierce and gentle. His mouth claimed hers with possession, but his hands cradled her face like she was something precious. Elena's fingers clutched his shirt, torn between pushing him away and pulling him closer. Just as quickly as it began, he broke away. Without another word, he strode from the kitchen, leaving Elena breathless and confused. Hours later, she stood at her bedroom window, watching the training session in the courtyard below. Dante moved with lethal grace, teaching his men hand-to-hand combat. His shirt lay discarded on a nearby bench, sweat glistening on his muscled shoulders in the fading light. Elena pressed her fingers to the glass, mesmerized by the controlled violence of his movements. He took down opponent after opponent, his technique brutal but precise. When he demonstrated a chokehold, his biceps flexed, and she remembered how those powerful arms had felt around her that morning. One of his men said something that made the others laugh. Dante's answering smile transformed his face, making him look younger, almost carefree. The contrast between this man and the one who'd kissed her senseless in the kitchen made her head spin. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up at her window. Even from this distance, the intensity of his stare pinned her in place. Elena knew she should step back, draw the curtains, pretend she hadn't been watching. Instead, she held his gaze, acknowledging the dangerous attraction growing between them. His lips curved into a knowing smirk before he turned back to his men, barking out commands in Italian. Elena remained at the window, unable to tear herself away from the deadly beauty of the man who claimed to be her protector, her captor, and perhaps something even more dangerous, her temptation. The grandfather clock struck 7 as Elena followed Dante down the mansion's dimly lit hallway. Her footsteps echoed against marble floors, each click of her heels marking another moment she couldn't take back. Dante moved with predatory grace ahead of her, his broad shoulders casting shadows in the flickering lamplight. "Stay close," he commanded, leading her into his study, a room she hadn't been allowed to enter before. Rich mahogany panels lined the walls, and leather-bound books filled floor-to-ceiling shelves. A massive desk dominated the space, and behind it, a wall of windows overlooked the darkening gardens. Elena perched on the edge of a leather armchair, her fingers digging into the smooth material. The air felt thick with tension as Dante settled behind his desk, his presence filling the room like smoke. A sharp knock broke the silence. "Enter," Dante called, his voice deceptively calm. Marco, one of Dante's lieutenants, stepped inside. His face was ashen, sweat beading on his forehead despite the room's cool temperature. Elena had seen him around the mansion before, always confident, always smiling. Now he looked like a man walking to his execution. "Boss," Marco's voice cracked. "I can explain." "Explain what?" Dante's words cut like ice. "How you've been feeding information to the Calabrese family. How you told them about Elena." Elena's breath caught in her throat. Her hands began to tremble as she watched the scene unfold, unable to look away. Marco fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "Please, they threatened my family. I had no choice." "There's always a choice." Dante stood slowly, pulling a gun from his shoulder holster. The metal gleamed in the low light. "You chose wrong." Elena wanted to close her eyes, to block out what was about to happen, but she couldn't move. Her body felt frozen as Dante circled his desk, each step deliberate and measured. "No, please." Marco's plea cut off as Dante pressed the barrel against his forehead. "You betrayed me." Dante's voice was terrifyingly soft. "Worse, you put her in danger." The gunshot exploded through the room. Elena flinched violently as warm droplets sprayed across her face and arms. Marco's body crumpled to the floor, blood pooling on the expensive Persian rug. Elena's chest heaved with panicked breaths. Her vision blurred with tears as she stared at the growing crimson stain. The metallic smell of blood filled her nostrils, making her gag. Dante tucked the gun away with the same casualness someone might pocket their keys. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. Blood dotted his white shirt like macabre artwork. "This is who I am, Elena." He stepped closer, and she pressed back into the chair, unable to escape. "I don't hide it from you. I won't pretend to be something I'm not." His fingers caught her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. His touch was gentle. The same hands that had just ended a life now cradled her face like she was made of glass. "You're trembling," he observed, thumb brushing away a spot of blood from her cheek. "You killed him," she whispered, her voice raw. "Just like that. Yes. No excuses, no justification. Just cold truth. And I'd do it again to keep you safe." Two men entered silently, efficiently removing Marco's body. Elena watched numbly as others appeared with cleaning supplies, erasing all evidence of what had happened. Within minutes, only the lingering smell of gunpowder and cleaning chemicals remained. Dante helped her stand, his hand steady at her elbow. "Go to your room, clean up, try to sleep." She fled on shaking legs, barely making it to her bathroom before emptying her stomach. The hot shower couldn't wash away the memory of blood spray or the echo of the gunshot. Later, lying in her bed, Elena stared at the ceiling as moonlight painted shadows across the walls. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Dante's face calm and deadly as he pulled the trigger. But then she remembered his gentle touch, the protective fury in his eyes when he spoke of keeping her safe. Her dreams, when they came, were a twisted maze of contradictions. Dante's hands on her skin, leaving trails of blood and fire, his mouth claiming hers while gunshots echoed in the distance. She was running from him, running to him, caught in an endless dance of terror and desire. In her fitful sleep, she couldn't tell if the pounding was her heart or footsteps in the hallway. Whether the heat she felt was fear or something darker, something that made her ache despite herself. Her mind kept returning to that moment in his study. Not the violence, but the way he'd looked at her after. Like she was precious. Like she was his to protect, no matter the cost. The night stretched endless before her, each minute marked by the war between her horror at what she'd witnessed and the undeniable pull she felt toward him. Toward a man who killed without hesitation but touched her like she was made of starlight. Elena tossed and turned, haunted by the truth she couldn't escape. She was falling for a monster who would burn the world to keep her safe. Elena's hands trembled as she wrote the letter, each word carefully chosen. The cream-colored stationery Dante had provided felt too fancy for a simple note to her brother. but she pressed on, desperate to reach out to Luca after weeks of silence. "Dear Luca," she began, her pen scratching against the paper. "I'm safe. Please don't worry about me." She paused, knowing she couldn't tell him the whole truth about the violence, about Dante, about the golden cage she now called home. Dante stood by the window, his dark silhouette cutting a sharp figure against the afternoon light. He watched her like a hawk, his presence both suffocating and oddly comforting. She could feel his eyes tracking every word she wrote. "I'll be home soon," she continued writing, though the promise felt hollow. Would Dante ever truly let her go? "Finished," she announced, folding the paper with careful precision. Her fingers lingered on the edges, reluctant to let this small connection to her old life slip away. Dante crossed the room in 3 long strides, his expensive shoes silent against the carpet. He took the letter, scanning its contents with narrowed eyes. Elena held her breath, praying he would approve. "Antonio will deliver it," he finally said, tucking the letter into his jacket pocket. "No address, no return information. He'll hand it to your brother directly." "Thank you," Elena whispered, meaning it despite everything. The hours crawled by like torture. Elena paced her room, watching the sun sink below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. She jumped at every sound, hoping for news of the letter's delivery. It was close to midnight when the first message arrived. Dante burst into her room without warning, his face carved from stone. He held his phone in a white-knuckled grip, and Elena's heart stopped at his expression. "Watch," he commanded, turning the screen toward her. The video was grainy but clear enough. Luca, her baby brother, tied to a chair in what looked like a warehouse. His face was bruised, his usually neat hair matted with blood. A man in a mask stood behind him, holding a gun to his temple. "No," Elena gasped, her knees buckling. Dante caught her before she hit the floor, his touch surprisingly gentle despite the fury radiating from him. A voice spoke from the phone. "Hello, Moretti. Your little guest has something we want. The girl knows what we need. 1 hour to decide either she helps us or her brother dies screaming." The video cut off, leaving them in terrible silence. "Please," Elena sobbed, clutching at Dante's shirt. "Please help him. He's all I have left." Dante's jaw clenched. "They're using him to get to me through you. Any weakness now will destroy us both. They'll kill him anyway, and then come for you." "You don't know that." She pushed away from him, anger mixing with her terror. "He's innocent in all this. Please, Dante. I'll do anything." "That's exactly what they're counting on." His voice dropped lower, dangerous. "Trust me, Elena. Let me handle this my way." But as she stared into his dark eyes, she saw no promise of salvation for her brother. Only calculation, strategy, the cold logic of a man who'd survived this long by being ruthless. That night, she lay awake until the mansion fell silent. The guards changed shifts at 2 o'clock in the morning. She'd learned their patterns well. With trembling hands, she slipped from her bed, already dressed in black leggings and a dark sweater. The hallway to Dante's office stretched endless before her. Every shadow seemed to hide watching eyes. Every creak of the old house threatened to expose her. But she pressed on, thinking of Luca's terrified face. The office door opened silently. She'd stolen the spare key from a maid's ring days ago, just in case. Guilt churned in her stomach as she crossed to Dante's desk. The computer hummed to life under her touch, the password as easy as his sister's birthday. She'd watched him type it once, memorizing the numbers. Shipping manifests, cargo routes, dates, and times filled the screen. Elena's fingers flew across the keyboard, copying everything she could find onto a small USB drive. Tears blurred her vision as she worked, each click of the mouse feeling like another betrayal. "I'm sorry," she whispered into the darkness, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, Dante." She placed the drive exactly where she'd been instructed, behind the third book on the second shelf, where one of the rival family's spies would find it during tomorrow's meeting. The information would save her brother, but at what cost? As she crept back to her room, Elena felt the weight of her choice settling over her like a shroud. She'd chosen family over loyalty, love over duty. But as she remembered Dante's gentle touches, his fierce protection, the way he'd saved her that first night in the rain. She wondered if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. The morning sun streamed through the dining room's tall windows, but its warmth couldn't penetrate the Arctic chill emanating from Dante as he stood at the head of the long table. Elena had barely taken her seat when she noticed the papers clutched in his hand, the stolen information she'd left out the night before. Her heart stopped. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" His voice was deadly quiet, controlled in a way that made her blood run cold. "That I wouldn't know the moment you betrayed me?" Elena's fingers trembled around her coffee cup. The familiar scent of breakfast pastries now turned her stomach as bile rose in her throat. "Dante, I don't." He slammed his palm on the table, making the china rattle. "Don't you dare try to explain." His dark eyes burned with such fury that Elena shrank back in her chair. "I gave you everything. Protection, safety, my trust." Each word fell like a hammer blow. "And you chose him." "He's my brother," Elena burst out, tears spilling down her cheeks. "What was I supposed to do? Let him die?" Dante's laugh was bitter, cruel. "And what about me? Did you think about what your little act of betrayal would cost?" He stalked toward her, each step measured and predatory. "Those shipping routes you exposed. Years of work, millions of dollars, dozens of loyal men who depend on those operations to feed their families." Elena pushed back from the table, standing on shaky legs. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, but they were going to kill him. He's the only family I have left." "And I'm nothing?" Dante's mask cracked for just a moment, revealing something raw and wounded beneath the rage. "After everything between us, I mean nothing to you." "That's not true." She reached for him, but he jerked away as if her touch burned. "Don't lie to me," he roared, making her flinch. "You made your choice. You chose your blood over me, over us, over everything I offered you." His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "I should have known better than to trust a woman again. To think you were different." Elena's sobs echoed in the vast room. "Please, Dante. I didn't want to hurt you. I just couldn't let them kill Luca. You have to understand." "Understand?" He advanced on her, backing her against the wall. "I understand perfectly. You're just like everyone else, willing to destroy me the moment it serves your purpose." His hands slammed against the wall on either side of her head, caging her in. "I should have left you in that alley." The words hit her like physical blows. "You don't mean that," she whispered. "Don't I?" His eyes were obsidian, devoid of the warmth she'd grown to crave. "You mean nothing to me. You're a liability I should have eliminated weeks ago. Dante, please, get out of my sight." He stepped back, straightening his suit jacket with mechanical precision. "Pack your things. You'll be gone by nightfall." Elena fled the dining room, tears blinding her as she ran up the grand staircase. She barely made it to her room before collapsing on the bed, her body racked with sobs. Hours passed as she lay there, torn between guilt and desperation. As darkness fell, she heard heavy footsteps in the hallway, but instead of Dante's familiar tread, multiple boots thundered toward her door. Before she could react, it burst open, revealing 3 masked men with guns. "No!" She scrambled backward, but rough hands seized her arms. A cloth pressed against her face, sickly sweet chemicals flooding her nose and mouth. "Dante!" she screamed, thrashing against their grip. "Dante, help me!" But no one came. No thundering footsteps, no gunshots, no salvation. As consciousness slipped away, she heard a cruel laugh above her. "Your precious devil isn't coming, whore." The voice was thick with mockery. "He doesn't want damaged goods anymore." The last thing Elena saw was her bedroom ceiling spinning above her before darkness claimed her completely, Dante's name dying on her lips as she slipped into chemical oblivion. The betrayal had cost her everything: her safety, her freedom, and worst of all, the man who'd become her whole world, even if she'd never admitted it to herself. As she faded away, Elena realized with crushing clarity that she'd lost far more than just Dante's protection. She'd lost his heart, and maybe even her own in the process. The concrete floor bit into Elena's cheek as consciousness returned, her body aching from countless bruises. Rope cut into her wrists, binding them behind her back. The musty air of the warehouse filled her lungs, carrying the stench of oil and rust. Through swollen eyes, she made out stacks of wooden crates and metal drums casting long shadows in the dim light. Finally awake, pretty thing. The rival's voice dripped with false concern. She recognized him now. Marco Salvatore, Dante's sworn enemy. He crouched beside her, grabbing her chin roughly. Your devil won't be coming for you. You're nothing to him now. Elena turned her face away, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her pain. But his words cut deep, echoing her fears. She had betrayed Dante, chosen her brother over the man who had protected her. The memory of his face when he discovered her betrayal haunted her, that flash of devastation before his features hardened into stone. "Where's my brother?" she managed to croak, her throat raw from screaming. Marco laughed, the sound bouncing off the warehouse walls. "Oh, sweet girl, did you really think I had him? That was just bait to make you dance." He stood, circling her prone form like a vulture. "And dance you did, right into my trap." Tears burned behind her eyes, but Elena refused to let them fall. She had sacrificed everything, Dante's trust, her own safety, for nothing. Hours blended into days in that warehouse, marked only by the changing of guards and sporadic visits from Marco. They brought her water and stale bread, just enough to keep her alive. In the endless darkness, Elena's mind wandered to Dante. Not the cold crime lord who had threatened to cast her out, but the man who had tenderly dressed her wounds, the one whose hands trembled when he touched her, as if she were something precious he feared breaking. She remembered the heat of his kiss, the way his eyes softened when she defied him, how he sat beside her bed during her nightmares. On the third day, or maybe the fourth, time had lost all meaning. Elena realized a truth that should have terrified her. Despite everything he was, despite the blood on his hands and the darkness in his soul, she loved him. She loved the monster and the man, the protector and the killer. The understanding settled in her chest like a weight, both burden and anchor. "Your devil's empire is crumbling," Marco taunted during one of his visits, kicking her legs as he passed. "The information you gave me was worth more than your pretty face." His shipments seized, his allies turning. Soon there will be nothing left of the great Dante Moretti. Elena closed her eyes, remembering Dante's words, "Any weakness will destroy us both." She had become his weakness, and in trying to save her brother, she had given his enemies the key to his destruction. The guilt was a physical pain, sharper than her bruises, but still she refused to break. Each time Marco demanded more information about Dante's operations, she met his questions with silence. Let him beat her, starve her. She would not betray Dante again. She clung to memories of his touch like a lifeline, his fingers ghosting over her burns, his arms carrying her from that rain-soaked alley, his body shielding her from threats only he could see. The warehouse settled into its nightly quiet, broken only by the distant sound of traffic and the occasional footsteps of guards. Elena dozed fitfully, her dreams filled with Dante's voice calling her name. Then a new sound cut through the darkness. Gunfire, sharp and close. She jerked awake as shouts and running feet echoed outside. More shots, closer now. The warehouse door burst open, flooding the space with harsh fluorescent light. Marco stormed toward her, rage twisting his features into something inhuman. His fingers, tangled in her hair, yanking her upright with brutal force. "Your devil has come crawling," he sneered, pressing a gun to her temple. The cold metal made her gasp, but hope bloomed in her chest like a flower through concrete. Dante had come for her. Despite her betrayal, despite everything, he had come. The warehouse erupted into chaos. The rat-tat-tat of automatic weapons mixed with screams and breaking glass. Through it all, Elena heard heavy footsteps approaching, measured, deliberate, familiar. Her heart recognized their rhythm before her eyes could make out the figure emerging from the shadows. Marco's arm tightened around her throat. "That's close enough, Moretti," he called out, his voice pitched high with desperation. "One more step and I paint the walls with her brains." Elena's gaze locked onto Dante's silhouette, backlit by emergency lights. Even at this distance, she could feel the rage radiating from him. Not the cold fury she had seen in his study, but something molten and primal. This was the devil of the underworld, Il Diavolo himself, come to claim what was his. The warehouse door exploded inward with a thunderous crash. Through the smoke and debris, Dante emerged like an avenging demon. Blood splattered his expensive suit, his eyes burning with murderous intent. The rapid fire of his gun echoed through the space as he methodically eliminated Marco's men, each shot finding its mark with deadly precision. Elena watched in terrified awe as Dante moved with lethal grace. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, face marked with cuts and bruises, yet he'd never looked more beautiful to her than in this moment of violent redemption. Bodies fell around him like dominoes, his rage transforming into something almost supernatural. "You're dead, Salvatore." Dante's roar reverberated through the warehouse. The sound sent shivers down Elena's spine, not from fear, but from the raw possession in his voice. Marco yanked her up by her hair, using her as a human shield. His hand trembled as he pressed a gun to her temple. "Stay back, Moretti. One more step, and I'll paint the walls with her pretty brains." Dante's eyes met Elena's, and in that brief moment, something passed between them. Trust, understanding, forgiveness. Without hesitation, Elena drove her elbow backward into Marco's solar plexus. The sudden movement threw off his aim just as Dante fired, the bullet grazing Elena's shoulder before burying itself in Marco's chest. Before Marco could recover, Dante was on him. The gun clattered away as Dante's hands wrapped around his enemy's throat. The two men crashed to the ground, Dante straddling Marco's chest. His fingers dug deeper, face contorted with a fury Elena had never witnessed before. "You touched what's mine," Dante snarled, punctuating each word by slamming Marco's head against the concrete. "You marked her perfect skin. You made her cry." Marco's face turned purple, his legs thrashing uselessly. Elena watched, transfixed, as Dante extracted his revenge. This wasn't just about business or territory anymore. This was personal. This was about her. "Please," Marco wheezed, clawing at Dante's hands. "Mercy! Did you show her mercy?" Dante's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "When she begged for water, when you left her bleeding on this filthy floor." With one final brutal squeeze, Dante crushed Marco's windpipe. The rival's body went limp, eyes staring sightlessly at the warehouse ceiling. Even then, Dante didn't immediately release him, as if ensuring death had truly claimed his enemy. Finally, Dante staggered to his feet, swaying slightly. Blood dripped from various wounds, his breathing labored. Yet his only focus was Elena. He crossed the space between them, dropping to his knees beside her bound form. "Mi amor," he whispered, hands surprisingly gentle as they worked at her restraints. The rope fell away, revealing raw, bleeding skin beneath. "I'm taking you home." Elena's wrists burned as circulation returned, but she barely noticed the pain. Her eyes traced every cut and bruise on Dante's face, her heart aching at what he'd endured to reach her. "You came for me, even after what I did. I will always come for you." His voice was rough with emotion as he gathered her into his arms. "You're mine, Elena. Nothing changes that. Not betrayal, not distance, not death itself." The sound of approaching sirens pierced the night air. Dante tensed, but Elena tugged him down until his head rested in her lap. Her fingers threaded through his blood-matted hair, offering comfort she never thought she'd give to a man like him. "Rest," she murmured, feeling him relax against her, just for a moment. In the distance, red and blue lights began to flash, but Elena felt no urgency to move. For the first time since her world had shattered, she felt truly safe. The devil had fought through hell itself to reclaim her, and in his blood-stained embrace, she finally found her peace. His breathing steadied under her gentle touch, his hand finding hers and squeezing softly. The warehouse around them stank of gunpowder and death, yet Elena had never felt more alive. The man in her lap was a monster to the world, a killer, a criminal, a terror in the night. But to her, he was salvation. He was home. The sirens grew closer, their wail a reminder that this moment couldn't last forever. Yet Elena continued to stroke Dante's hair, Her other hand pressed against one of his wounds to slow the bleeding. His blood mixed with hers, a physical manifestation of their unbreakable bond. "Elena," he murmured, eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You understand now? This is who we are. This is what we'll always be." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Not tears of fear or regret, but of acceptance. She had crossed a line there was no returning from, and strangely, she felt only relief. In Dante's violent world of shadow and blood, she had found something real, something true. Elena's hands trembled as she pressed the antiseptic-soaked cloth against the gash on Dante's shoulder. The warm light of his bedroom cast shadows across his bruised torso, each mark a testament to the violence he'd unleashed to save her. His muscles tensed under her touch, but he remained silent, his dark eyes fixed on some distant point beyond her. "Stop," he finally said, his voice rough with exhaustion. He caught her wrist, stilling her movements. "You don't have to do this." "Let me help you," Elena whispered, trying to pull free from his grip. The events of the past few days had left them both raw, stripped of pretenses. Dante released her suddenly, as if her skin burned him. He stood, ignoring the pain that flickered across his face, and walked to the window. "You should go. Pack your things. I'll have someone drive you home." His words fell like stones between them. "You deserve a normal life, Elena. Not this. Not me." The medical supplies clattered as Elena set them aside, anger rising in her chest. A normal life? She crossed the room to face him. "There is no normal life anymore, Dante. Not after everything." He refused to look at her, his jaw clenched tight. "I'm a monster. You've seen what I do, what I'm capable of." "Yes, I have." Elena stepped closer, forcing him to acknowledge her presence. "I've seen you kill. I've seen you protect. I've seen all of you, Dante Moretti, and I'm still here." His laugh was bitter, cutting. "You betrayed me. For your brother." "Yes." The admission hurt, but she wouldn't deny it. "I betrayed you because Luca is the only family I have left, because I couldn't bear to lose him." Tears welled in her eyes, "But losing you, that destroyed me." Dante's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Don't." "I mean it." Elena reached up, touching his face, feeling the stubble beneath her fingertips. "Every day in that warehouse, I thought of you, not just of rescue, but of your touch, your voice, the way you look at me when you think I'm not watching." He grabbed her wrist again, but this time his grip was desperate rather than restraining. "Elena, I can't live without you," she confessed, her voice breaking. "I won't. You can try to push me away, but I'll fight you on this. I choose you, Dante. All of you, the violence, the darkness, everything." Something snapped in him. With a growl, he pulled her against his chest, his mouth crashing down on hers. The kiss was fierce, desperate, filled with all the words they couldn't say. Elena melted into him, her hands sliding up his bare chest, careful of his wounds but needing to touch him everywhere. Dante backed her toward the bed, his movements predatory. "Tell me to stop," he demanded against her lips. "Tell me this isn't what you want." Instead of answering, Elena pulled him down for another kiss. She poured everything into it, her fear of losing him, her acceptance of his world, her desperate need to be his. Dante responded with equal fervor, his hands roaming her body as if memorizing every curve. They fell onto the silk sheets together, a tangle of limbs and heated breaths. Dante's mouth traced a burning path down her neck, marking her, claiming her. Elena arched into him, gasping as his teeth grazed her sensitive skin. "Mine," he growled, the word both a question and a declaration. "Yours," she answered without hesitation. "Always yours." Their clothes disappeared piece by piece, each revelation met with hungry touches and passionate kisses. Dante worshipped her body with a reverence that brought tears to her eyes, his usual control replaced by raw need. When he finally joined them together, Elena cried out his name like a prayer. They moved as one, their passion building to a crescendo that threatened to consume them both. Dante's grip on her hips was bruising, possessive, while Elena's nails raked down his back, marking him as thoroughly as he'd marked her. "I love you," she gasped, against his mouth, feeling him shudder at the words, "I love you, I love you." Dante captured her confession with a kiss that stole her breath. When they finally broke apart, his eyes were dark with emotion. "Ti amo tesoro," he whispered, his voice rough with feeling. "You're everything to me." Their release came simultaneously, waves of pleasure crashing over them as they clung to each other. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, their breathing slowly returning to normal. Dante's arm was locked around her waist, holding her close against his chest as if afraid she might disappear. As dawn began to paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, Eleanor traced lazy patterns on his skin. The dangerous mob boss who had terrified her weeks ago now felt like home. His heartbeat under her ear was the most comforting sound she'd ever heard. Dante pressed a kiss to her temple, his grip tightening slightly. "Sleep, Tesoro," he murmured. "I've got you." Elena smiled, snuggling closer into his embrace. In the arms of her devil, she had never felt safer. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows, casting warm patches across the marble countertops. Elena moved with practiced ease through Dante's expansive kitchen, the sizzle of bacon and rich aroma of coffee creating an almost normal atmosphere. The two armed guards visible through the window reminded her that nothing about this life would ever be truly normal. Her brother Luca had been returned 3 days ago, shaken but alive. She could still see the moment Dante's men had brought him in, how her fierce protector had personally ensured Luca's safety before arranging for him to stay in a secure apartment across town. The memory of Dante's careful attention to her brother's welfare made her heart twist with complicated emotions. The coffee maker beeped, and Elena reached for Dante's favorite mug, a simple black one that felt incongruous among the mansion's luxury. Her hands no longer shook when handling hot liquids. The burn on her palm had healed to a faint scar, much like the other marks from that night in the alley. Some scars, she'd learned, could become reminders of survival rather than trauma. Heavy footsteps approached. She knew his walk now, could distinguish it from his men's. Dante entered the kitchen like he entered every room, with an air of absolute authority. His crisp black suit was immaculate, but Elena noticed the shadow of fatigue under his eyes. He'd been up late, handling the aftermath of her rescue, ensuring every loose end was tied up permanently. "You don't have to cook," he said, his voice rough with something more than morning gravel. He moved behind her, close enough that she could feel his heat but not quite touching. Elena turned, spatula in hand. "I want to." She met his gaze steadily. "It helps me think." His dark eyes searched her face, looking for signs of distress or regret. She knew that look. He'd been watching her carefully since bringing her home, as if expecting her to break or run. Instead of stepping back, she reached up and straightened his tie, a deliberately intimate gesture. "Thinking about what?" he asked, catching her hand before she could withdraw it. "About how nothing is simple anymore." She let out a soft breath. "About how I don't want it to be." Dante's grip tightened slightly. "I can't promise you safety," he said, the words seeming to pain him. "My world, what I am, it will always bring danger, but I can promise you this." He reached into his jacket pocket with his free hand, producing a small black velvet box. Elena's breath caught as he opened it, revealing a stunning diamond ring. The stone caught the morning light, throwing rainbow fragments across the kitchen walls. It was beautiful, but what made her heart race was the look in Dante's eyes. Possessive, yes, but also vulnerable in a way few ever saw. "You'll never be left for dead again," he vowed, his voice dropping to that low register that made her shiver. "You're mine, Elena, my home." He slid the ring onto her finger, the metal cool against her skin. "Everything I am, everything I have, it's yours, even the darkness." The bacon began to smoke behind her, but neither of them moved. Eleanor stared at the ring, then at the man who had saved her, hurt her, protected her, and ultimately claimed her entire world. "I chose this," she whispered. "I chose you, Dante. The monster and the man." His hand came up to cradle her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. The tenderness of the gesture contrasted sharply with the calluses she could feel. Hands that had killed for her would kill again without hesitation. Say it again, he demanded softly. I'm yours. The words felt like freedom rather than chains. You're home. Dante's control broke. He pulled her against him, his kiss fierce and claiming. Elena melted into him, accepting everything. The danger, the violence, the protection, the love. His arms caged her against the counter, and she could feel his heart pounding against her chest, matching her own racing pulse. When they finally broke apart, the bacon was well and truly burnt. Elena laughed softly, the sound breaking the intensity of the moment. Dante's lips quirked, and he reached past her to turn off the stove. I'll have someone bring us breakfast, he said, his hand settling possessively on her hip. The ring caught the light again, marking her as surely as his touch did. Elena leaned into him, breathing in his expensive cologne mixed with gunpowder and leather, the scent she now associated with home. Outside, his men patrolled the grounds. The city waited with its dangers and opportunities, and countless enemies plotted in the shadows. But here, in this moment, she was exactly where she belonged, in the arms of her devil, ready to face whatever darkness came their way. Together, they watched the sunrise paint gold across the kitchen, marking the beginning of their new life, one built on blood and bullets, but also on a love fierce enough to survive it all. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.